Alright everybody, it's talking head time again. First, I need to apologize for not getting this video out sooner. I kind of got carried away with life these past 2 weeks. Mea culpa. So this video is going to be a little bit technical. So get out your notebook and put on your thinking caps. This video is about what is called reductionism, the danger of reductionism, its implication for theory, any theory, the universality of logic, and how to use logic to spot errors not only in thinking, but also how logic can be used as a powerful tool to show the inner contradictions within an ideological position. The purpose of this video is to establish those tools as we begin exploring the foundation of identity politics in the videos to follow. So let's get to it. First, I need to say this. The reason I am opposed to this movement called identity politics is because I believe that it actually undermines the ability to fight against racism, discrimination, sexism, and bigotry. And I don't think a lot of people understand that, which explains that knee-jerk circle the wagons reaction that essentially shuts down debate and any valid criticism against this movement, which is exactly why I'm putting out this series of videos on this topic. I believe that a great majority of people have bought into this socio-political movement not because it's truthful, but because it's fashionable. It's what everyone else is doing. It's massive preference falsification, and it's seen as revolutionary, which naturally appeals to the youth especially. And ultimately, it gives a sense of direction and purpose to people's lives, which I completely get. But if a belief system is not based on evidence or reason, then something else is going on here, which is why many people, including myself, view this as some sort of new religion. And I think a lot of social commentators on this topic are missing a crucial ingredient in their analysis of this belief system. This movement's rise in popularity, I believe, is due not only to a confluence of unique cultural factors, but also for deep psychological reasons, which is that this belief system appears to be filling a deep existential void in people's lives and giving them a profound sense of community, which is something the modern world, stripped of religious significance, could never do. And I think those factors, as well as others, explain why this movement has caught on so quickly. In a very real sense, this belief system simplifies the world into two competing categories of either good or evil. And for those who adhere to these beliefs, it not only fills them with passion, but is to be on the side of the angels fighting for cosmic justice. However, contrary to what everyone assumes, the very concept of identity, specifically group identity, which everyone is celebrating and circling around, and is used as a lens from which to filter the world through, rests upon shaky theoretical ground, and has not been proven. It's not that the older conception of a more traditional view of the individual has been refuted, it's simply been brushed aside, not by withering criticism or powerful arguments, but simply by dogma, academic compliance, authoritarianism, intellectual bullying, and loud, screeching, inflammatory slogans, which is why all that one comes across in the literature of this movement is assertions, sweeping generalizations, anecdotal evidence, bold declarations, and theory upon theory upon theory all the way down, but never any bedrock, never any proof or connection with reality to justify why this view of the world is true. That's the most important thing. Not how it makes me feel about myself, but is it true? Why should I believe it? Compel me, give me reasons. Otherwise, your cherished theory is no better than phrenology, bloodletting, and the study of mythical unicorns. And yes, I am being facetious, because a theory without substance is not a theory but an ideology, which is what this belief system is. Once you peer beneath the surface of its enchanting slogans and emotionally charged rhetoric, it is a house built upon stilts, with no real structure to support it. And that's what I intend to show in the remaining videos to come. Now, I realize that many of the things in the social sciences and in philosophy, which is where this belief system originated, should not be expected to conform to the same empirical standards of the hard sciences like physics and chemistry. To expect that kind of exacting rigor is not only misplaced, but is also an abuse of the scientific method. Not every discipline should be filtered through the lens of empirical proof, because to demand and expect that same level of proof is to commit what is called the fallacy of reductionism, which is exactly the same fallacy I believe that identity politics commits, just in a different way. Now you may be asking, all right, Jason, what is reductionism? Great question. Reductionism is when you attempt to explain, oversimplify, or reduce complex phenomena by forcing it into categories or a theory that just doesn't fit. And part of the problem is that if the underlying theory is wrong, it might actually obscure a much deeper reality. This happens when you don't allow the evidence to speak for itself, but instead attempt to manipulate it and bend it to fit into some preconceived theory or ideology. And a very good example of reductionist thinking is the philosophical position that some people hold to called materialism or naturalism, or its more extreme form called eliminative materialism, which states that the only thing that exists in the universe is matter. Matter, according to materialism, is all there is. What this means is that there is no reason to look outside the system for a causal process outside of nature, because the system itself is a closed system. There is only physical matter, or what this position refers to formulaically as time plus chance plus motion and matter equals life. Now, this philosophical position also entails that if there is only matter, then there is no soul or spiritual or supernatural dimension to reality. Materialism as a worldview defines those things as mere concepts, which since they are intangible, non-physical, and therefore unobservable, then either they don't exist or nothing meaningful can be said about them. In other words, materialism rejects or eliminates those things as unnecessary. Except there's one catch. How do you account for the mind? Isn't the mind also unobservable, intangible, non-physical? And isn't also the mind just a concept? What I mean is this. Have you ever seen someone else's thoughts? How much do thoughts weigh? Can a thought fit into a test tube? And if you can't see or touch them, then they must not exist according to materialism's own belief system. If all there is matter, then the mind doesn't exist by default. What materialism has effectively done as a belief system is to not only rid the world of unobservable phenomena, but to rid itself of rationality, objectivity, and truth, because those categories themselves are not physical things. Here's the issue. Matter doesn't think. Rocks don't think. And if matter doesn't think, then the category of truth doesn't apply. And if the category of truth doesn't apply, then materialism isn't true. The mind has to exist outside of or transcend matter to be able to not only make meaningful statements, but to claim objectivity and truthfulness. The main problem with this position is that it's reductionistic and therefore destroys the very foundation upon which it rests. This is also referred to as self-referential incoherence. If all there is matter, then there is no such thing as thinking or a thought process, which is by definition the mind. And if there is no thought process, then how does the materialist come to this conclusion? Is he not using his own mind and his own thoughts and his own thinking to arrive at this conclusion? And if he is using his mind, then he's actually got two major problems. First, how does he account for being able to transcend matter, for which there is no causal process outside of, according to the strict beliefs of his own position? And second, why is he the only exception to the rule? What makes him so special as to be uniquely exempt from his own philosophical position of materialism? Something doesn't add up. Either the materialist performs some miraculous feat that the rest of us mere mortals can never hope to accomplish and is able to rise above his own materialism, or he is speaking utter nonsense. This is why he has to posit some miraculous feat and hope that no one catches on. He needs something outside of his own closed system to not only get the ball rolling, but to save his own theory, which is ironic because this is usually the very same thing that he pokes fun of religious people of believing and saying, that God himself is that cause that transcends the system and gets the process started in the first place. What's the old saying? What is matter? Never mind. What is mind? Not matter. Here's what it comes down to. If you hold to a position that undercuts the very foundation of your own position, then not only is your position false and contradictory, but it refutes itself in the very process of trying to affirm itself, because it suffers from the errors of reductionism. In essence, attempting to reduce, explain, or interpret complex phenomena through the lens of an inferior worldview, paradigm, ideology, or philosophical theory that undercuts the very basis for its own beliefs is to commit this fallacy. And I believe the theoretical foundation of this movement called identity politics commits just such this fallacy, which if it does, is devastating to it, which explains why adherence to this belief system must deny rationality, and attack the very rules of logical analysis. And I believe they do this to mask this ideology's own theoretical shortcomings, which explains not only why they are so loud, vociferous, and combative, but also why they refer to logic as a form of Western imperialism. However, contrary to their loud denunciations, logic still persists. As a matter of fact, neither they nor their opponents can escape it, which brings us to our next section on logic. Now, there are times when spotting this fallacy is relatively easy because it's so obvious. For example, if I say I can't speak one word of English, what's wrong with that statement? I just spoke more than one word of English, attempting to say I couldn't speak more than one word of English. If I say I am not speaking, what's wrong with that statement? I committed an act of speaking while denying at the same time that I wasn't. I contradicted myself by affirming that which I attempted to deny. So those are relatively easy examples. However, there are times when spotting a contradiction is difficult because sometimes either it's buried under layers of academic jargon that are purposely ambiguous, or it is so subtle as to be almost imperceptible. Here's an example. If I say logic is invalid, or I can't stand people who think logically, or logic is a form of Western imperialism, what's wrong with those statements? I'm using logic and the validity of logic in the very act of trying to invalidate it. Not only that, but each of those statements not only contains words that have logical meaning attached to them, but those statements themselves contain a logical structure, a syntax. They have a subject, predicate, noun, verbs, linking verbs, etc. What I'm saying is this. The very act of communication assumes logic. You can't circumvent, subvert, or get away from it. If communication is to be meaningful and convey information, then you are involved in using logic. Otherwise, all you are left with is grunting. What I'm saying is this. You can't escape logic because in the very act of trying to deny it, you actually affirm it. That's the amazing thing about logic. And the harder you try to escape it or deny it, the harder it's just going to beat you down. So the person who says that logic is just another form of Western imperialism is using logic in the very act of trying to denounce it. Here's what it comes down to, and I hope this will clear up a lot of people's misconception about logic, which is this. Logic is neither Western nor Eastern. Logic was not invented but discovered and belongs to all human beings of all races and of all colors because it is universal. So arguing that logic is Western or a form of Western imperialism is not just a complete lack of understanding, but betrays a very childish mindset that is not mature in its analysis. And what shocks me, actually terrifies me, is that you have trained academics teaching young impressionable minds that logic, rationality, and objectivity are merely cultural constructs, which if that line of argumentation is true, then not only is that argument itself a cultural construct, and therefore not true, but so is this movement called identity politics. Once again, you can't escape using logic. Now I'm getting ahead of myself in this video here, but hopefully you can already see in embryonic form my criticisms to come in the next couple of videos. So let me get back to grasping why logic is fundamental, not just to refuting arguments, but to life itself. And I want everyone to see this. This is actually one of the most beautiful things about this world in which we live. That logic itself is beautiful. It's a gift. I know some of you are like, what? We talk about sunsets, the ocean, the Grand Canyon, the Himalayas, and Salma Hayek as being beautiful. And they are. But logic is also beautiful. Once you realize that logic is undeniable and is inescapably built into the very fabric of thinking itself, then the more you grasp it and understand it, the clearer your thinking becomes. And here's why I stress this. I really believe that when you can think clearly, it centers you. And that is real self-esteem, not phony participation trophies, not a movement or ideology that simply carries you along on an emotional high or gives you feelings of moral superiority. I'm just going to say it like this. Going along with what everyone else is thinking or doing is easy. That's the easy road. True self-esteem comes from putting in the hard intellectual work and refusing to go along with the crowd or group, which is exactly what identity politics wants you to adhere to. When you can articulate what you believe and why to yourself first, then everything will tend to fall into place. What it comes down to is this. The better your mind thinks, the sharper your mind becomes, and the less vulnerable you are to bad ideas and bad ideologies that do nothing but prey upon you and manipulate you. This is also why I started this channel, because adhering to and defending the truth is not just some trivial matter or someone else's responsibility, at least from my point of view, but is everyone's and is everything, because truth frees the mind. It liberates it. That's what it means to be human, not going along with the group or group identity or group politics. Now, just a second ago, I said that sometimes this error or fallacy of self-referential incoherence is hard to spot because it can be so subtle. However, when it comes to this ideology, I believe this is not by accident but on purpose, which means it is based upon deception. And if what I am saying is true, which I believe it is, and there is more than ample evidence to support that claim, then this entire ideology or movement is based upon a lie, no matter how noble it may sound. And what is that lie? It's real simple. It's power. This ideology needs, wants, and desires power. If you think about it, what do all human-centered ideologies want? They want to rule. Now, this doesn't imply that every person who holds to this belief system are power-hungry or liars. That's not what I'm saying. I say this because I believe that the idea and the individual holding to that idea are not one and the same. I believe that you can attack the argument vigorously, but leave the person unscathed, because that's actually an act of compassion. To demolish falsehood is to free the individual from mental bondage. And I believe that you can do that with both strength and gentleness. This belief that I hold to is because my underlying belief system or worldview allows for such action and compassion. However, it is precisely this belief that is fundamentally opposed by this belief system of identity politics. Because the idea and the group are inseparable, there is no individual, just group identity, so that trying to correct someone's beliefs is tantamount to oppression. This is why this movement is not based upon evidence or reason, because it attacks evidence and reason as themselves being oppressive concepts. Now, once again, I'm getting ahead of myself here. I have more to say about this in the upcoming videos. So now that I've spoken about the fallacy of reductionist thinking and how to spot it, how does this then apply to identity politics? Well, I believe this ideology suffers from the same fallacy upon multiple levels. And if you can grasp this, then the whole system of thought crumbles with it, which is what we will be discussing in the upcoming videos. Until then, non ducor duco, I am not led, I lead.